Hello everyone. I wish you a peaceful and wonderful day. On the very first night, they bring home the money earned from their own hard labor. A sudden heavy rain starts pouring and the roof begins to leak right above their only savings, forcing Toan and Tu Diem to choose between fixing the house or keeping the small amount of capital for tomorrow. Now, let's explore the story of Toan and Tu Diem together. Will their slow but steady steps be enough to protect their fragile home? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next ones. The morning has not fully arrived yet, and the yard still holds the dampness from a night of strong wind. Toan has been sitting on the low step since the last sounds of insects were fading. He bends over his old pair of shoes and threads the laces slowly, pulling each knot tight, as if this simple action needs his full attention. He once wore these shoes only when he visited construction sites out of curiosity, never imagining they would become his daily work shoes. Behind him, Tu Diem steps out, carrying 2 lunchboxes wrapped carefully in cloth. She places them beside him and sits down across from him. The 2 portions are exactly the same: tightly packed rice, a little boiled vegetable, 1 egg, and a small pinch of sesame salt. There is no meat, but it is enough to last through a long day of physical work. Neither of them talks about how hard the day will be. The quiet morning feels like an unspoken agreement that their lives are moving into a different rhythm. Toan stands first and lifts the borrowed tool bag from Uncle Nerm onto his shoulder. He checks the hammer, the trowel, and the worn-out gloves. Tu Diem puts on her conical hat and tightens the strap under her chin, then rolls her sleeves up neatly. When they lock the gate, both of them look back at the house for a moment longer than usual. The small house with its aging roof and peeling walls is where they sleep, where they place their earnings on the table each night, where they have survived the most uncertain days. Toan takes a deep breath and starts walking. Tu Diem walks beside him for a short distance. At the small intersection, they separate. There is no hug, no dramatic goodbye. Toan only reminds her to drink water on time. She nods and continues toward the field. The construction site is at the upper end of the village, where a row of brick houses is being rebuilt. When Toan arrives, the sounds of shovels, bricks, and voices are already filling the air. The supervisor looks at him briefly and asks if he can handle heavy work. Toan answers with a short yes. He does not explain who he used to be or what he once owned. Today he is simply a new worker. His first task is to carry cement bags from the truck to the mixing area. The first bag on his shoulder makes his back pause for a second. The weight presses into his neck and spine. He walks slower than the man ahead of him. Behind him, someone murmurs, "Can he manage?" Toan hears it but does not turn. He sets the bag down, exhales, wipes his sweat with his wrist, and goes back for another one. The rough surface burns his palms. After a few trips, the skin begins to swell into red patches. He changes his grip and keeps moving in the same rhythm as the others. Not fast, but without stopping. In the field, Tu Diem joins a line of women harvesting peanuts. The soil is dry and dusty. The owner shows her how to grip the root and pull in one steady motion so the plants will not break. The first time she bends down, her back tightens immediately. The experienced workers move quickly, their hands following a rhythm learned over years. A woman named Sister Sao, older and quiet, looks at her and says it is fine to work slowly as long as she does not give up. The sentence is simple, but it helps Tu Diem relax her shoulders. She begins to pull each plant, shake off the soil, and stack them into her sack. Sweat runs down her back and soaks into her shirt. She does not look at the time. She only keeps a steady pace so she will not lose her strength too early. The sun rises higher. At the construction site, Toan is assigned to pass bricks up the scaffold. The wooden plank is narrow, and each step must be placed carefully. He grips the metal bar and lifts the bricks one by one. At one point, his foot slips slightly on the dusty surface. The worker below looks up. Toan stops for a second, adjusts his stance, and continues. The supervisor walks past and places a bottle of water beside the bricks without saying a word. Toan understands that this silent gesture is a form of acceptance. He drinks deeply and feels the dryness in his throat ease. In the field, the buyer's truck arrives earlier than expected. The owner announces that anyone who reaches the target will receive extra pay. The experienced workers speed up immediately. Tu Diem looks at her sack and sees it is still far from full. She changes her posture and works faster, despite the growing pain in her back. Her hands tremble, but she does not stop. In her mind, she sees the evening when they will place the money on the table and know they have moved forward. At noon, Toan sits against an unfinished wall and opens his lunchbox. The rice is still warm because of the cloth wrapping. He looks at the egg and imagines Tu Diem eating the same meal somewhere else. He eats slowly and drinks water in small sips to save for the afternoon. Around him, the workers talk about material prices and construction deadlines. He does not join the conversation. He listens and quietly reviews the rhythm of his morning work in his mind. At the same time, Tu Diem sits under the shade of a low tree at the edge of the field. Sister Sao sits beside her and pushes a bottle of water toward her. They talk briefly about how the heat this year feels stronger than before. No one asks what she used to do. That absence of curiosity makes her feel lighter. In the afternoon, Toan's palms are covered with blisters. He wraps them with a piece of cloth and continues mixing mortar until the call for the end of the day. The daily wage is handed to him. He holds the money for a long moment. He counts each bill slowly and carefully. This is the result of a full day standing in dust, between doubt and a small recognition. He puts it into the inner pocket of his shirt, close to his chest. In the field, Tu Diem's sack is weighed last. She receives extra because she has reached the target. She takes the money with both hands and bows slightly in thanks. When she straightens up, her legs feel numb, but she still walks out of the field with a small smile. The sunset spreads across the village road. Toan walks back from the construction site while Tu Diem comes from the field. They meet at the familiar turn without planning it. Neither asks if the other is tired. Toan opens his palm first. Tu Diem does the same. Two small stacks of money lie in their hands. Not much, but enough to be looked at for a long time. They both smile and walk home side by side, their steps slower than in the morning, but steadier. The road home in the late afternoon is covered with a thin layer of dust. They keep walking side by side, just as they did when they met at the familiar turn. But their steps are slower now from the weight of the day. From time to time, Tu Diem changes the hand holding her hat because her wrist feels numb. Toan notices but does not mention it. He simply walks a little closer, so when a motorbike passes, she does not have to move too far to the edge of the road. Having someone beside them after a long day of labor makes the distance feel shorter. When they reach the gate, Toan unlocks it and waits for her to step in first. The small house looks the same as in the morning, except the sunlight has withdrawn from the yard, leaving behind the smell of heated soil and dry straw. Tu Diem hangs her hat on the familiar nail on the wall. Toan takes off his shoes and shakes out the sand trapped inside. They do not sit down immediately. They go to the well behind the house to wash their hands. The cold water stings the blisters on Toan's palms. He tightens his jaw slightly before continuing. Tu Diem sees the swelling, but only says softly, "Let me get the medicine." Her own fingers are still lined with red soil. Dinner is simpler than usual. Fresh rice, the remaining boiled vegetables, and a thin soup. They place their wages on the table before eating. Neither of them counts the money again. They only look at it for a long moment, as if memorizing this feeling. For the first time after many upheavals, the money on the table is not what is left from the past and not borrowed. It is earned by their strength. Toan pulls the low chair closer and says quietly that he will return to the site early tomorrow. Tu Diem answers that she will go back to the field. The ordinary exchange makes the house warmer. After dinner, she brings out a small box of medicine. Sitting across from him, she gently pierces the blisters on his palms and applies ointment. Toan does not pull his hand away even when it hurts. Then he wraps a clean piece of cloth around her wrist in return. The movements are slow and familiar. Outside the yard, night has fully settled. The wind moves through the banana leaves with a sound like whispers. Suddenly, rain begins to fall. The first drops hit the old metal roof in scattered beats and quickly turn into a steady roar. Water starts dripping from a corner directly above the table where they had placed the money. Tu Diem quickly puts a basin under it. Toan watches the thin stream running along the wall. Both of them understand that the roof has weakened. The rain is loud enough that they have to raise their voices slightly. Toan moves the table to a dry spot. The two small stacks of money remain in his hand. He looks up at the roof and then at Tu Diem. Without words, they think about the same question. Should this money be used to repair the roof or saved for the days ahead? The rain continues and the basin fills slowly. Toan brings a ladder and leans it against the wall, intending to climb up to check the leak. Tu Diem holds his arm and tells him to wait until the rain stops. He looks at his blistered hands and nods. They sit down together and listen to the rain as if it is asking them a question without an answer. No one panics. There is only quiet calculation. Toan says if the supervisor allows an advance tomorrow, he will buy new sheets of metal. Tu Diem says she will ask Sister Sao if anyone has old roofing to sell. They speak like partners repairing an old machine that still needs to run. The rain becomes lighter and then stops. The night returns to stillness. Toan takes the money inside and places it in a small wooden box. He does not lock it. Tu Diem wipes the water from the floor and dries the table. When everything is done, they sit on the front step. The ground is still wet and the air cooler. Far away frogs begin to call from the fields. Toan leans against the pillar and exhales, a long breath that carries less weight than before. He says the day was exhausting, but his chest feels lighter than it has in months. Tu Diem nods and answers that if they can work like this every day, they will get through. They sit for a long time without speaking. Each follows their own thoughts, but neither feels alone. Inside the house, the empty lunch boxes are washed and turned upside down on the shelf. The dusty shoes and the conical hat rest side by side in the corner. These small things make the house feel alive with them. Before going to bed, Toan stands under the eaves and looks at the leaking spot, estimating how many metal sheets will be needed. Tu Diem spreads the mat and turns off the light. They lie down. Their backs still ache and their hands still burn, but neither mentions it. In the dark, Toan reaches for her hand. She holds it firmly. Outside, water continues to drip from the roof into the basin in slow, steady drops. The first working day ends with clear exhaustion, but also with a stronger sense of stability. They know they can keep going.
Sau ngày đầu tiên cùng đi làm thuê, Toàn ở công trình phụ hộ, còn từ Diễm ra ruộng thu hoạt động dưới nắng gắt. Những bước chân chậm, đôi tay rụt và tấm lưng mỏi không làm họ dừng lại, vì cả hai đều hiểu đồng tiền mang về tối nay là khởi đầu mới. Buổi trưa, họ ăn cùng một phần cơm ở hai nơi khác nhau, suy nghĩ về nhau để tiếp tục cố gắng. Chiều xuống, mỗi người nhận tiền công bằng chính sức mình, rồi gặp lại trên con đường làng quen thuộc. Chị mở tay ra cho nhau xem mà không cần nói nhiều. Đêm đến, khi vừa kịp đặt số tiền đầu tiên lên bàn, cơn mưa lớn bất ngờ làm mái nhà dột ngay phía trên. Họ lặng lẽ tính toán giữa sửa chữa mái và giữ vốn, nhưng trong sự mệt mỏi vẫn nắm tay nhau, tin rằng ngày mai sẽ tiếp tục đi làm.